All right, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Safely Extreme podcast here on Game Wisdom, where it's in the art and science of games. I am, of course, Josh Bycer, and joining me, my co-host from soon-to-be not Nexus Games, Sharky.
Hello, everybody, and it's almost seeming to be a meme at this point about renaming the company. But renaming a company, or even naming it in the first place, is not an easy or fast task. But I think
Hey,
we're almost there.
hey, rats, how are you doing? All right, this is going to be our episode for the week of September 12th, 2021. Summertime is finally over at last. Now we're going to be heading into the fall summer season, where I got my infamous tomato outfit about 2 years ago.
Your tomato cosplay.
hmm
So you're going to get another tomato cosplay now?
I hope not, but we'll see. But we have another great topic lined up for you this week. We are continuing our not so secrets of game dev talk. We are on part 4. And for this week, we are going to be focusing on understanding your limits and your scope, as well as preparing for future games. If we somehow get through that, we do have a backup topic, but we'll save that for a reveal if we make it that far.
Mm-hmm.
So, to begin with, understanding your limits and scope. This is something that it's definitely a challenge for a lot of new developers, especially those who come, right out of school. They finish their game dev courses, they're ready to really jump into the game industry, and then they're left with that idea of what the heck am I going to make?
Yep. And I mean, before you need to understand your limits first, and you have to at least make one hobby project before you go into commercial. Like that's you need a complete game before you think about making a commercial game.
Mm-hmm.
Whether it's and when I say a complete game, I mean I mean two different things actually. Because like when we're talking about a complete hobby game, we just mean a game that you're not going to work on anymore and could be considered
Mm-hmm.
complete in some way, which would be like a game jam, kind of thing. And I also mean complete in the sense as in a complete commercial game, as in it's complete and ready to be sold commercially. But we're talking about the first one right now about a complete hobby game. You want a complete hobby game so you have a measure of your skills. At least some kind of measure. You know that it takes this much work to do this, this, and this kind of thing. And then you can multiply that by how many things you would have to do inside of a game. Now, then keep in mind, whatever you estimate, it's going to be wrong. It's going to be really, really wrong. And finding that out is part of the planning process. If you want a game that probably takes whatever time you want it to do, take that time and divide it by 3. Probably, and that'll probably get you to about where you want to be. So if you're planning on making a game in 3 years, scope that game to be complete in 1 year. Because that 1 year worth of scope that you planned out will probably take you 3 years to do.
And trying to make that distinction between hobbyist and commercial, that for a lot of people, if you are just starting out, like you've never made a game before, you've dabbled in, but you've never actually finished one, it's always important from a motivation, just from a psychological point of view, to at least get one game out the door. And there's a reason why everyone says that your first game most likely is going to fail. Because the first game is you without any real game dev knowledge. You can go to school, learn about game design, you can go to school, learn about programming and art, but actually sitting there and creating a product, not even a commercial product, just something, is a very huge endeavor.
Well, when we talk, but the thing we need to complete here is that when we're talking about you failing on your first game. We're talking about you're failing on your first commercial game,
Hmm.
not your first hobby game, because you can't fail on it as long as you complete it. You know,
Hmm.
so you know, after you complete your first commercial game, you need to have that buffer in there and plan that your first commercial game is going to fail.
Hmm. And again, people will get lucky. There's always the random factor there. But
Although it's arguable if they are getting lucky, because those that quote unquote get lucky and succeed with that first commercial game are
mhm,
often the unluckiest of all, because they don't learn their lessons and
mhm,
fail every game after that, and
yeah, and
they fade into obscurity really really quickly. So
yeah,
it's questionable if that is lucky.
yeah, there is a lot, as we've said, about the production side and the management side of being in the game industry that you really need to keep track of. And that's the kind of stuff that we'll probably talk about once we finish, the middle block of the series. But when you are starting out and you're trying to figure out what you want to make as a developer, again, when we say what you want to make, we're talking about commercial product, not a hobbyist. You really need to understand your scope. And again, the scope is what can you feasibly make? And I should clarify further, what you can feasibly make within an acceptable period of time. You shouldn't be saying, "Oh, my first game product will take 25 years."
You
We're, we're talking. What would you say, like 1 to 3 years for your first product?
1 to 3 years is the sweet spot for all products when it comes to
Hmm.
game dev, And like I said, if you're planning on 3 years, then aim for one, because it'll probably take you three times longer. So, if you're planning for a 3 year development cycle, then plan your scope for 1 year. Now,
Hmm.
then here's the thing: is if you manage to complete everything in less than a year, your game is likely underbaked. It's probably going to fail commercially because of that. There's not enough to it. There's just issues, all kinds of other stuff. We see this all the time. This is not like a hard rule, but this is a general rule that if your game when it's complete, quote unquote complete, it took less than a year, it just feels like an incomplete or hollow game kind of thing, or just it's just not all there kind of thing. On the other hand, again, a general rule, not a hard rule, when it takes over 3 years, it feels overbaked and just, like they didn't know what they were doing kind of thing. They put too much detail into this one thing, and then they just completely left holes over here kind of thing, or just like none of this makes sense. It feels like there was all this mismanagement and all this other stuff. Generally what you run into when you have that higher
Yeah.
time.
But also keep in mind that when we're talking about 1 to 3 years, that rule gets a little bit more murky when we talk about AAA development, as
Mm-hmm.
AAA games will often have a huge scope, lots and lots of things going on, and it can take a lot, it can take more time to get those games done. Now, with that said, if you're, 5 plus years in, no matter what your scope is, something's going wrong. We had the Anthem situation,
Mm-hmm.
or when Blizzard cancels products and they get, recirculated into something else.
There is an exception to that,
Hmm.
and that's when you're, when it takes so long because you're not working on it as
Full
a
time.
commercial product. You're not working on it full time. Like several of these, there are the exceptions really are. Oh, I worked on this on my spare time for 3 years, and then it's like, oh, I realized there was something here, and now I'm quitting
Right.
my job or whatever, and I'm working full
Hmm.
time on this for 2 years,
Yeah.
kind of thing. And that's a very different thing because you would actually start that timer probably right around the 2 year mark, or the three
Yeah.
year mark when they quit their job to start on it when they started working full time.
Yeah, and some of them will never quit their full-time job. They will just work on a game part-time for, the duration of the product. Maybe they'll go full-time, 80 to 90% of the way through, maybe even after the game is out and, fingers crossed it becomes a success. And that is definitely okay for this. Now, again, if you're focusing full time, this is your 9 to 5, your 8 hour day kind of thing, then yeah, 1 to 3 years of that is considered acceptable.
Yeah,
And
although when you're not going full time, that means it's a lot more riskier because not only do like the game industry, just as a whole, like move and advance, and you're being left behind, but you're you're not putting as much time in there. So like like there's all kinds of issues there, potential issues where that can definitely fall through. So be careful with that. Another thing that can be said is when you're understanding your limits. If you understand your limits, you understand that maybe you're a great programmer. Maybe you couldn't draw your way out of a paper bag. Maybe you don't know what a sound is, kind of thing. Knowing those limits means that you need to hire somebody to do your art. No, you need to hire somebody to do your sound. You need to hire somebody to do the things that you do not know how to do, or the things that you are not very, very competent in doing. When you're making a commercial game, you don't want a let's say you have a 9 out of 10 skill in programming, and you have a 1 out of 10 skill in art, and a 3 out of 10 skill on music, and a 1 out of 10 on design. You need to hire somebody for design, you need to hire somebody for art, and you need to hire somebody for sound at that point, because
yep.
to get a commercially viable product, you need probably at least a bare minimum of 7 or higher skill wise in every aspect of game dev to be able to push this out, which means that you can't be solo. And
And
I think a lot of people misconstrue that. Like, you can be solo for a hobby game. You can technically be solo for a train wreck of a commercial game, but when you're actually doing a legitimate uh commercial game, it has to be in a team. Now, when I say a team, that means you can't be solo, but that does not mean you have to have somebody sitting beside you working.
mhm.
It means you can hire somebody for outsourcing. It means you can hire, buy assets, which is also outsourcing in a way. But I would prefer to hire out for you know outsourcing rather than assets, because then you have the matching issue that you have to deal with. But like, you know, it would mean like contacting a publisher and having them publish your game. Doing these things would not be solo. And Rastel said, Stardew is solo. No, Stardew is not solo. Stardew hired a publisher. They had a whole team of marketers. That is not solo.
And there is a difference between, and again, we see this with a lot of these arguments online about who is and who isn't a part of the team. Anyone who is on a product or on the production side, whether you are a tester, you're doing music, you are rendering grass, you are part of the game development side.
Yeah, I wouldn't say
However,
you're part of the team. There is a difference between having team members and not being solo kind of thing, because you can not have a team member, and at the same time not be solo at the same time, because a team member would be somebody who is they're, no matter what game you're working on, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
They are
And
a direct employee rather than an outsource or an asset
yeah.
people. And
But
not having a team is different from not being solo.
yeah, but there is a difference between having a team of people who are all on the game development side and having somebody who is the solo game designer. Because the designer is the one who's coming up with the systems, the mechanics, building things along those lines. And there are plenty of games who have a solo game designer, but they will have a team in terms of game dev.
Yeah, and
And
there's plenty of solo programmers, solo artists, solo a lot of things. But
but if
you can
everyone
have a
is
team.
together,
You can have a team of 15 people, and every one of them only have one role. This is a solo artist for the project. This is a solo
yeah,
programmer for the project. But none of those people are solo for that game.
yeah,
I mean,
and
I'm
that's
solo
the
for a lot
difference.
of aspects of my games because I don't have very many people that I hire. But I'm not solo for the game itself.
Hmm. Yeah, so again, for people watching, whenever we hear stories about solo game dev or, this was made just by one person, it's important to clarify that point of
It's a
was this
lot.
did this one person do every single task on that list? Not just game development, but programming, music, art, PR, marketing, etc. Or was it just did they just build the game and then they had other people come in to do the art, other people do the PR, etc., etc.
I know I've heard people say I am the game developer when when in reality all they were a programmer. A
Or
programmer
just the game
is
designer.
not the a game developer. It's a game developer. It's the programmer. And some people conflate, one for the other. And no, no, no. The programmer is not the game developer. If that was true, then there wouldn't be teams.
Yeah.
And there also
Hmm.
wouldn't be aesthetically pleasing games either, or games with sound or music or publishers or sales or anything else.
Hmm.
You wouldn't even
Yeah.
know what a video game was because there would be number one no video because there would be no art.
Yeah. So to bring this back to the topic, let's see what Matt is saying. Yeah, and you need to have usually if you are starting out, one of the major things of understanding your limits and your scope is just who is on your team. Now, major studios, they will force contract and, they'll be preparing these things for years on end in terms of having temporary or contract people come in to do work. As an indie developer, you are going to be far more limited. And it's important, as Shark said earlier, to understand just what you are capable of doing. Because there is a difference, there's a huge difference between building a game and you know how all your tools work, you know how everything is going to go, versus you're building the game while you're still trying to learn how all these tools work.
Mm-hmm.
And we've seen lots of developers who get into that trouble of trying to learn the tools at the same time they're trying to build the tools and or build something with them.
Or the
And
problem of learning Unity while Unity's building underneath them and they have to constantly change stuff.
mhm. So
But
you have to be aware of just what it is that you have access to. And the advantage of any developers along these lines, as we've seen, is that limitations are oftentimes a good thing because it
mm-hmm.
allows you to work around them and figure out what your strengths are. If your team doesn't exactly have, you know, the art team from Insomniac or Nintendo, then you probably don't want to make a fully 3D, completely animated title as your first game.
No. And Rastel said that Team Cherry published, Hollow Knight on their own, and that's good. It still doesn't make them solo; it makes them self-published. I
Hmm.
mean, it's Team Cherry, but like not solo Cherry, not one person Cherry, not Tom
Hmm.
Cherry. It's not Tom
Hmm.
Cherry. It's
Hmm.
it's it's Team Cherry, And that's another reason why we tell you when we do our Steam review pages, when you have a name and only a personal name on your Steam page as the developer or publisher,
Mm-hmm.
then you have you're popping red flags to the consumer. I mean, how do they manage it? They had good marketing people on their team. They it's not hard. I mean, it's like if you can go out and hire an artist, you can go out and hire a marketing person, a PR person. And, that's what I've been studying to be for the last few years, because we self-published our last game and I did the marketing for it. And I didn't do a good enough job, but I did learn a lot, and I've learned much more since then.
Yeah.
And, the
And
store pages are key to that.
yeah. And to Pony's comment, yeah, just be Nintendo and all your games will succeed. It's kind of like the Disney, all your dreams will come true.
Well,
I did look up Dust and Elysian Tale, and they do have a publisher. It says they were published by Xbox Game Studio.
Hollow Knight?
No, a Dusk and Elysian Tale.
What about
What
Hollow
Pony
Knight?
was talking. Just their company. Just now, they could have had somebody on the team who does marketing. I mean, Kid
Well, if they
Fox.
if they if they published it themselves, they had somebody who did marketing.
Mhm.
Question is how good were they?
And again, like Hollow Knight succeeded, but examining the success of Hollow Knight is not our topic
Yeah.
for this week.
But the fact
But
is if there was a game that self-published, then they had marketing
Mhm.
because and
And
they hence had a marketer on their team. Now then, was it a professionally trained marketer? I don't know. I mean, do you have personally do you have professionally trained programmers, you know, artists, music designers on your team? I don't know, but more than likely not.
Yep. And I mean, when you look at something like Red Hook, like Chris and Tyler both had extensive experience in the AAA market before they formed their studio. So they had experience in multiple disciplines, just the two of them. But they still, of course, hire other people. They wanted to expand their skill set. Because as a studio, you need to be well rounded in this aspect. Because this is how you're going to be able to figure out, again, what you're capable of doing. And Darkest Dungeon, of course, by Red Hook, they self publish it as well. But again, though, they had experience from other products going into this. And like we've said on a previous part, it is becoming, I think, more and more important to have a PR person in your development studio. Somebody should be the dedicated PR, your community manager, because these are the additional skills that are going to help you when it comes to fleshing out your studio. But
Yes.
again, that is off topic for what we're discussing right now.
And I do want to point out, somebody was mentioning that they only had a team of four. Well, because they had a team of four doesn't mean they didn't have a, they didn't outsource people, because they could have had outsourced people on top of that team. They could have had a team of four plus like four more people who outsourced. They could have outsourced a Twitch streamer to do their marketing. I've seen that happen several times. They could have outsourced a YouTuber to do their marketing. They could have outsourced somebody who does stuff on Twitter to do their marketing. I mean, just because they only have four team members doesn't mean that's the end of their resources because outsourcing does not count as team members unless
Yeah.
you hire them onto your team, and they do count for work that can be done. So
Yeah.
it's and part of that understanding your limits and scope kind of thing is not only understanding what you can do, but the money you have to be able to pay people to do the things you are not good enough to do. And it's very, very important that you have that money, because if you don't, then you're not going to find anybody, probably. You know, you could get very, very lucky, but more than likely you're not going to find that person who's going to be able to deliver the high enough skill to build the stuff you need for the game. So you absolutely need money. Yeah, I've already tried that rats. It felt horribly. And that's the point. Is I did that for many, many years. That's the reason why I started back in 2004 trying to build a studio with no money, and it failed horribly, over and over and over again. And it wasn't until 2000 and I think it was 2007. No, I think it was 2000, early 2015, late 2014, when I was like, you know what, screw this. We're going to do this with money now. And the second we swapped to that, that was when Chromasia started to development kind of thing, and we went all the way. And also went starting to go all the way on Neon Continuum. So like, having money, it doesn't have to be a lot of money. It's good to have a lot of money, but how did I get that money? Because I saved about $2 a month for a very long time. That's how I got that money.
Yeah.
Because it took a long
for
time, because I don't got much money.
yeah, and if
And
you're looking for how to raise money, get investors, this is the wrong cast for that.
yeah, the point is you can save pennies, nickels, and dimes. You know, rob the couch cushion and end up using that money to fund, over time, to fund your game development.
Mhm. But I think with that, anything else regarding understanding your limits and scope before we move on to talking about your future products?
No, I think that's about it.
And I can't think of anything else. Again, it's one of those topics that it kind of segues into a lot of other talks. Yep, exactly, Pony. That will be the subject. That will be my strategy for the next book.
Mm. You're
So,
selling your book in loot boxes?
hmm so let's talk about future products because this is something where the last point a lot of people stumble on. This is the one that will oftentimes get them because future products. I don't mean future art products or art projects. I mean actual future commercial products is how you establish yourself as a company. Because when it comes to succeeding in the game industry, unless you do have that Fortnite, Among Us, Minecraft level game, you need to be thinking about what your next product is going to be. And a lot of developers tend to struggle with this, especially when they're making the jump from a art project or doing this as a hobby into making this as a commercial game. Because when you're thinking about your studio in terms of, its catalog of games, suddenly becomes a lot harder to just make whatever the hell that you want.
Mm-hmm.
And there's several reasons for this. One is that as you become established, so does what people expect out of your games. And there's a huge glare that I'm going to hold my hand like this for a little bit. But there's
You're
a
flashing us,
huge,
Josh.
yeah, there's a huge difference in terms of I can just make whatever I want versus I have a consumer base now. What are they looking for? Now, the second point about this is that when you are an established company, well, you have bills to pay. You can't just take off for 8 months and say, I'm just not going to do anything. I'll just play around. My other people who work for me, they won't care.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you have to, Josh,
Yeah,
lighting everything, but
I'm going to get up and do it while Shark's saying this point.
yeah. So you 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 have to prepare everything, and if you make a low quality game as your first commercial game, then people are going to expect more low quality games out of you. So don't go that route. I would highly suggest not going that route of making a low quality game and then have consumers expect more low quality games out of you. But rather, you want to brand yourself with quality, I think. And in that, you need to charge a quality price. And, but when you establish yourself, some developers say, we're only going to make games in this genre. You can do that, but I think that might be limiting yourself a little bit too much. People are like, I made a tactical RPG, so every game I'm going to make after this is a tactical RPG kind of thing. And I personally don't think you should do
Yeah,
that.
and
I think you could do that and be successful, but I don't think that should be where you focus at. What I
yeah,
think
and
you should be, go ahead.
what I was gonna say is, and we've seen developers, unfortunately, who get stuck in that rut of I made a platformer. My next 20 games will be platformers, and they're all going to be the same kind of platforming. And the thing about game development, at least along these lines, is that people want to see evolution. They want to see iteration. If you remember from the 90s, that a lot of studios went in dramatically different directions for their first sequel to a game. Super Mario to Super Mario Brothers 2,
Well,
Castlevania to Castlevania 2.
the two was not, the real Super Mario Bros. 2 is
Yeah,
actually a Kaizo game.
yeah, of course. um, Metroid to the Game Boy Metroid, they did change the progression around. And the thing that people want to see is that there is an upward trend. That if your first game is, let's say, a 7 out of 10, your second game could be 7.25, 7.5. They don't want to just see this. That's your entire game development. It's just, we're just remaking the same game, but maybe instead of a blue background with green foreground, it is a green background with blue foreground. And I've seen developers who get caught into that trap. Like, there's a developer that I've played his game several times, and it just feels like they're going around circles. That it's just the same general concept. Maybe a little bit better art, maybe there's a little bit of a difference, but every single problem that I had with, game A is in game B, C, D, E, F, G, and so on. And that's the kind of thing that wears on people. And
That's
this is often
games that
why,
don't grow.
yeah, this is often why, and why this topic is so important, that we see developers will do different things. If you remember Abbey Studios, their first game was Ruse, then they went to Renowned Explorers, then they went to Godhood. Kid Fox, they did forget the name of it. The one that is like you're exploring a destroyed asteroid or something, shattered something, and then they went to Moon Hunters. Then they did the Shatter Isle. Then they did I don't know what's the name of it. The one that was like the murder mystery with the cyber demons. But the point is, oftentimes a lot of indie developers will do, and this goes back to what Shark was saying, that they'll do very different things with each one of their games. but it will still stay within a relative framework. There'll be some kind of connective tissue, be it from a game design point of view or from an aesthetic point of view, like we see with Clay.
Well, I think that you can make one genre and do it right, but it's hard. It's because every game needs to be very different. It can't just be the same game, slightly better. It needs to either be worlds better or it
Hmm.
needs to be worlds different kind of thing.
Yeah.
And
And
the thing is what I would suggest rather than that is rather instead of going for the exact same genre, go for the exact same or very similar audience. You know, because like the whole reason why they're doing it like that is for audience purposes. You know, because you want the people that bought your last game to also buy your next game and then supercharge, you know, your fame, which will get, you know, Steam algorithm to, you know, be like, oh, a lot of people bought this game, so we'll send a lot more people in there. So the more people you can get to buy your game on day one, day two, day three, week one, the more Steam is going to send there. So therefore, by appealing to the same audience or a very close proximity, you're building that people that are going to buy your next game kind of thing.
yeah,
And if you're doing it with quality games, you know, more so than unquality games. So you really need the quality in there. So here's the thing is I divide games into two categories as a whole. And then there's of course, you know, games that are in the gray area in between. But I would say there's thinking games. You know, this would be like your CCGs. This would be your roguelike card games like Slay the Spire. This would be your, you know, your 4S games. This would be your RPGs, your tactical RPGs, your action RPGs. You know, stuff like Diablo and stuff would be on that gray line kind of thing. You know, beat 'em up with RPG mechanics would be on that gray line. You know, a lot of different, you know, things would be on that gray line. And then on the other side of that, you have the reflex base, you know, where you got your Marios, your Dark Souls, uh, your 3D platformers, your 2D platformers, your Super Meat Boys, your, what else we got over there on the reflex side? Your first person
shooters.
shooters, your third person shooters.
Mhm.
Um, Either way,
Yeah.
the audience of if you're building a reflex game, then you know if you build another reflex game, you're a lot more likely to have people you know come over. And if you built a you know a thinking game, you'd be more likely to get people to come over when you come over to another thinking game. So like reflex versus thinking kind of thing, and like there is a line that blends in between, but you want to, I wouldn't say stick to one side, but stick to one area. It's like a grayscale kind of thing, like you know wherever you stick your dart in the first one, you know, kind of thing, build out a radius around that and stay within that radius kind of thing.
Yeah. And we've seen developers who have experimented, who've gone vastly different directions with their games. Now, the advantage of that is that it does allow you to hit a new market. But the disadvantage, of course, is that you need to be careful in terms of, what exactly the marketplace is going to be for that kind of game. Because if you are known for making turn-based games, RPGs, 60, 80 hour long experiences, and then your next game is a 3 to 5 hour long action game, you're going to be in a hard place in terms of getting into that spot because you're not going to be established in that space, and your existing fan base is going to be more in line with your turn-based, your more abstracted kind of design.
And not only
Now,
that, but your fan base, certain parts of them may be very pissed off at you and may actually make anti-marketing for you all over YouTube because you're making something they don't want.
Yeah.
We've seen that many times where people will go way different on their game, and you're like, and then you get these people that hate you because of it, and they will rag you all over YouTube. Like they made the best tactical RPG ever, and now they're making this really shitty first person shooter. I hate this studio. They can burn, kind of thing. And you know, the bigger you are, the more wave that's going to be of those kind of thing. So it's definitely something I would definitely try not to cause that wave.
Yeah. But again, a lot of that is also able to be mitigated through successful community management. And that, again, is its own unique skill set and its own unique topic.
It,
Now,
but not all of it can ever be prevented.
mhm. Now,
You can just take the
when it
bullets out of the
comes
chamber.
to planning out your titles, it's very difficult, I think, for a lot of people, again, to know just how far to go. Because any kind of success can be blown up, but at the same time, it can also ruin your studio. Because we've seen developers who their first game did reasonably well, so they doubled down on their second or their third game. And that's the one that basically sinks the company. And this kind of, again, is a good tie into the previous topic about understanding your limits and scope. That if your first game, let's say, sold, I don't know, let's say 30,000 copies, you shouldn't plan your second game to then say, well, if I work on it 3 times longer, then it should at least sell 90,000 copies, right? No, you really have to be really careful about this. And it's something that we've talked about before with developers like Jake Burgett, Cliff Harris, Jeff Vogue, developers who have been around long enough to know that they need to be making games that keep them in the black in terms of their profit.
Mm-hmm.
And you can experiment, you can do unique things. But the more unique something is, the less you should be fully committing to it. If you are the studio known for making a first person shooter, and you want to make a brand new shooter, something really amazing and great, then yeah, you should really go all in on that because you already know that. If you want to try making your hands at an RPG or a deck builder, you probably don't want to be committing 5 years of your studio's time and money to that kind of project.
Yeah, and I want to go on a tangent here because I want to put out, you know, something that is directly related, but a completely different thing. Now, when we talked about, you know, the thinking person games versus the reflex game, we can see that this is an important thing, you know, with the relationship between those when we
Mhm.
talk about mixing genres and mini games kind of thing and stuff like that. Because, like, if you look at, you know, like, I mean, a lot of Final Fantasy games, they're RPGs kind of thing. And they have, like, mini games inside of them, like little card games and stuff, because it's another type of thinking person's game, so they like it kind of thing. They're more likely to go over to it. And when you mix the genres kind of thing, you come into the issue where if the audience is not the same or very similar, you know, oftentimes you'll turn off one audience with one part and turn them on with the other part, and nobody's going to like one part or the other. For example, you know, a dating sim and, you know, Doom, you know, because like if you have a
And
dating sim and Doom, most of the people that like Doom is a reflex game, is not going to
mhm.
like the dating part because that's a thinking part, you know, and you know, the people who like the thinking part are going to like the Doom part, you know, the reflex thing. So like
Yeah.
it's
And
it's very it's very hard, and
yeah, and this is why if you're going like again, mixing genres is a very advanced form of game design. And what we've seen more times than not is that when you mix these genres, you're often you're not going to get the extreme ends of both spectrums. If I'm making, first person shooter in match 3, I shouldn't be expecting to get the Doom Eternal, Ultra Nightmare, all cred clear kind of people to play that game. Likewise, I shouldn't be expecting the people who are, the perfect Candy Crush saga players to play my game as well. Because, like we said, when you're mixing genres, excuse me, you are diluting aspects of both. What you are trying to do is figure out if there is a market that's in the middle. Somebody who is not the best first person shooter fan, and somebody who's not the best Match 3 player, who's looking for something new to try. And there you go, Doom Eternal Farming Sim. And if you can hit that point, and if you can resonate with people with something that hasn't been seen before, at least in that capacity, you are basically hitting the jackpot on a slot machine.
Yeah, I think the better option, rather than doing genres that are misaligned, find genres that build on top of each other. We've seen this in the past, when the rogue genre with the being able to carry over and build up stuff, crossed with card games that were able to that you would collect cards and everything, and you're like collecting and building up. Well, that ties directly together, because collecting and building up is sort of the same thing in a lot of aspects. Hence, Slay the Spire and Monster Train was born, because they were able to find genres that worked really well together to the point to where they were almost the same thing. And then they combined those aspects and were able to create a great merger between the genres.
But you can even go further back than that with Spelunky, The Binding of Isaac, and Enter the Gungeon. That they basically said, well, roguelikes are all about replayability. Let's apply that to a genre that is oftentimes considered very linear, a very fixed experience. And again, those 3 games really work. A Nuclear Throne by Vombeer as well. And the point, though, is that it's not about one-to-one. It's not about taking one genre, taking the other genre, just mashing them together, and then picking whatever is left. It's about picking what aspects you want to focus on. And, and Spookware is an example of more of a WarioWare kind of game as well. But when you are planning your future products, like we've said, people don't just want to see 20 different platformers that all are just the same basic thing. They want to see things that are different. And one of the surefire ways of doing something different is figuring out other aspects that you can integrate into it. And again, you'll always have those fringe cases, your ghost simulators, Racketeer, that, they just come out, they did something so different that there really wasn't a market for it. And then, in a way, they become a market unto themselves.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not something as a developer that you can feasibly plan your company's business model around.
Yeah. And another thing we should say is that you shouldn't be planning on mixing genres until you've released at least either 3 commercial games or 2 successful commercial games. Because
and you should have a background in some capacity in those genres.
Yeah.
Whether you've made games in them, or you've done enough research and study on your end to understand, what works and what doesn't work for these genres. You can't just say, well, we've never made a game before, but you know what? We're going to make the first dating, cooking sim, train simulator theme park management game.
Why is that the metric? Because you need to know how to make one or multiple things work and work right to where it is a commercial success. you have succeeded with it before you can attempt to break it. You know, it's like, what would be a good analogy here? You better learn how to put the plates on the dinner table before you can, you know, make a professional art piece out of, you know, food on plates on a dinner table, because if you drop the plates on the way to the table, you know, that's going to say that whatever you make is going to be ruined, kind of thing. Like, you need to be able to be sure that you can do the stuff right before you can do it. Well, before you order takeaway, you got to be sure you know how to use the phone or the internet.
Mm-hmm. Now, when
If
you're planning future
if
products
if,
out here,
if you try to order takeaway and you never used a phone before and you have never used a internet before, good luck. You know,
but to bring this back, because we got to keep this to our schedule here, when you're planning your future products, you can experiment. And this goes back to some of our previous parts when it comes to play testing and getting criticism. That if you want to experiment with something, try on your own spare time. Try making a prototype. Try maybe going to a game jam and seeing if there is a market for this. Because again, consumers only know what they've seen before. And if we just went by, only making what's already been established, we would have never gotten out of the platformer first-person shooter era of the 90s.
I mean, RPGs were in the 90s too.
Mm-hmm. But you have to, again, consider just what you are able to do. Now, again, if your company grows, let's say you are a company known for making first-person shooters or RPGs, and your company grows and you bring in established veterans or people who have worked in other genres who can kind of play off your skills. We've seen how AAA developers have gone to work at either their own indie studio or get picked up by a smaller studio. You can certainly use their knowledge. But again, there has to be knowledge there. And this is why, going back to a previous point, why solo game designer is oftentimes a very rough position to be in. Because if the only person of your team is consistent of, me, myself, and I, we can't exactly outsource to me to work on previously unworked or a genre that we haven't had a chance to do yet.
You forgot Irene.
Yeah. Well, hire Irene. Maybe she'll be able to make. Irene can do the Dark Souls play. She's an expert Dark Souls player. Come on, Irene. Yeah, but if you're trying to build your next game, you have to understand again, what was your first game like? It's a song, Matthew.
No, it's a movie.
Yeah.
Jim Carrey movie.
Yeah, there's also the song too.
There was
Come
a
on,
song, Me,
Irene.
Myself, and Irene.
Eileen. No, Eileen, I think it was.
Eileen?
Yeah.
I don't know that song. I know the movie, Me, Myself, and Irene, with Jim Carrey.
But back on topic. When you're trying to build your next game, it's important to understand what worked and what didn't work in your last game. And again, this gets back to what we talked about last time in terms of being able to critically examine the game. Because the one thing you do not want to do is repeat problems. And problems can be anything. It could be having, your gameplay isn't working right, UI issues. One of the games I play from a developer, each and every one of their games has horrible UI and horrible option settings.
Mm.
And I am sure people have commented on it. I'm sure there have been complaints, but they haven't been fixed.
They need to hire somebody. It
Hmm.
does UI.
Yeah, and one of the worst things you can do in terms of long-term studio work or long-term studio growth is keep repeating the same problems. You can grow, you can make a better game, but if those problems are still lingering, people it's only going to go so far where people are just like, I don't want to deal with, you know, here's the great part of your game, and here's all the issues that are attached to it.
Hmm.
And they're going to get tired of it, and they're not going to come back. And worse still, new consumers aren't going to put up with it. If a new consumer loads up your game that you charged, $15 for, and is of a worse quality of a game that they could have spent $9.99 on, they're going to refund that because they don't owe your studio anything. They're
Nope.
just going to load it up and say, ugh, close it out and refund your game.
Is that a refund reason on Steam now? Just is.
Yep. There is no reason. It's just meh. You can just refund a game because of meh.
Do you have anything else on this? Because I don't think I have anything else.
Well, we're about an hour. Do you want to do the third topic for maybe like 15, 20, or you want to call the show here?
I think we can because I don't think that's going to be a long one. I mean, it's going to have a lot of points in it, but I don't think there's going to be long. You know what I mean?
All right. So I think as the final point for this one, as a studio, you need to be thinking about your next product. Even if you are successful, even if your first game turned out really well, you have to be considering what your next game is going to be and then the game after that. And this is how you build your company profile. And this is how you also, as we said before, become a part of your branding. That when Clay says, hey, we got a new idea for a game, or, here's a teaser for a new game we're working on, everyone stops and pays attention to it.
Are you on the
Just
wrong
like,
topic?
what was that?
Are you on the wrong topic?
No, this is again about your future products and why it's important.
Oh, you're talking about how to prepare for your future games still?
Yep.
Okay.
Because you have to be considering the extent of your company's profile or your company's portfolio. And if you're able to keep putting out good games, you're able to keep growing and iterating, all this begins to build that snowball effect. Because most likely, you're going to have a stinker. Now, is it going to be a stinker that completely ruins your company and everyone's going to get fired for it? Hopefully not. And
Unless
we've
you
seen,
release Cyberpunk 2077.
I think they're still weathering that storm with The Witcher and Gwent.
Yeah, for now.
What you want is to be able to experiment, and even if your experiments are okay, they're not ruining your company. Clay with Grifflins and Hot Lava, they did not earn Auction Not Included and Don't Starve money. But that's okay. They have a product out there, they grew their portfolio, and they're able to keep going. And ultimately, that is your true goal for this topic. Is that you want to be able to make games that earn you enough money to keep making games. And if you can keep doing that and you can keep growing, you're kind of like on the upward trend there. But with that, let's get to our third and final point because it is kind of related in a lot of this, and that is the platforms for success. Where do you have to put your game to get maximum value? And there's definitely a lot to this point, as Shark said, but it's relatively quick because, in a way, these answers have already been given to you
Hmm.
just by looking at who is the 800-pound gorilla when it comes to a digital platform.
Or maybe it's 1,000 pound or several 1,000 pound dragon.
Hmm. And the answer to that is, well, Steam.
Yep.
You can love them, you can hate them, you can, swear that you'll never want to talk to Gabe Newell ever again. But in terms of market share,
On the PC.
you are going to be on Steam.
Yeah.
Now, does that mean you should never look at GOG, Humble, Epic Games?
No.
No. But you have to understand where people are going for for those kinds of games. There's a reason why a lot of developers who make 2D platformers or modern retro style games will also look at Nintendo Switch, because Nintendo is known for platformers. They have a lot of platformer fans who buy Switch titles or buy Switches. So, you know, those two things kind of fit together. Now, if I'm making a hardcore first person shooter, MAO rated game, the Switch may not be the best platform for that.
Xbox might, though.
Or Sony.
Yep. Probably more Xbox, though, because Sony might not even allow that now.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I mean, when you're looking at platforms, specifically on the PC, Steam has to be one of your platforms.
Mm-hmm.
Does it have to be at launch? No. Because, like, the thing we know about Steam is when you release a game on Steam, even in early access, it's the same as if you released it on non-early access. They are the exact same. There is no difference to the Steam algorithm based off of that.
Mm-hmm.
You don't get, more promotion by going early access and then going full release later. You don't get more promotion. You in fact get less promotion generally.
Yeah.
And you want to, a method I have seen that tends to work is they go early access, but they do that on Epic, and then they come to full release on Steam.
And then
Now,
you have to worry about pissing people off who don't like the whole, Epic exclusivity deal.
yeah, but it's not an exclusivity deal. You're just doing early access there. The issue is though is like I would prefer to go live on both Epic and Steam at the same time. But I've heard many stories about Epic refusing to take games like that. They will not. I don't know how true this is, but I've heard stories that if you want to go live at both at the same time, they will say no to you on Epic, and that's really crap. But I've heard stories that that's true. I don't know for a fact if it is true or not because I haven't been there and done that myself, but definitely something to keep in mind, kind of thing.
Yeah. Now, the other option is to use itch as there's two ways of using itch. One is kind of like your test bed for a game idea. As in, we have this great idea, it's a very weird game, maybe something we haven't really seen before. Let me throw over to itch and see what a lot of people say. The other option is we're going to release it on Steam, but we know that there is, I don't know, we use like the term like garage band or the underground fans, so people who don't want to be on Steam, or maybe they want to support us directly. Because again, on itch, developers get 100% of the proceeds.
No, they don't. They get to choose how much
Yeah.
of the proceeds they want. They could get 100%, or they could get 0%,
Yeah.
or they could get 30%, whatever they want, whatever they set it to.
Yeah. But you are given at least a little bit more freedom in terms of earning revenue on itch compared to Steam, at least for right now. So they will release their game on itch. And if it does really well, or if it gets picked up or noticed, they may go for a bigger release on Steam. But again, the point of this topic is that all roads, in a way, are inevitably going to lead to Steam. Especially if you're in a developer. Now, if you're working at a company like EA, EA
It doesn't matter where they place their games.
Yeah.
Here at EA.
they don't care about Steam. They like Origin because they control Origin. Just like Ubisoft likes Uplay, or where they change their game to. But even with that said, they also know that if they're trying to appeal to the PC market, and Bethesda did this as well, there has to be a Steam version of their game.
Yeah. So, Pony, you're saying that Steam charges 1% too little?
Mm-hmm.
They should be charging 31% instead of 30%?
Yeah, but again, as a developer, and again, as if you're trying to build this as a commercial business, you have to know where the people who are going to buy your game are going to be. And this is not something that just indie developers have struggled with. For the longest time, console developers had ignored the PC. How many action games, how many RPGs have been console exclusive for years?
Mm-hmm.
And it really wasn't until maybe 2, 3 years ago at most that Japanese developers have understood, hey, maybe PC gamers like the Yakuza series. Maybe they like the Nippon Ichi super grindy RPGs.
Yeah, NIS has been one of those leading teams that have been really
Mm-hmm.
coming to PC. You know, they're not only bringing everything they currently have to PC, you know, that's
Mm-hmm.
being released at the same time, but they're also bringing stuff that is way back in their library kind of thing. They're bringing porting that stuff to PC.
Look at the difference with Bandai Namco. That the first Dark Souls game came out several years after on PC, completely poor port. It had to be fixed by a modder. When Dark Souls 3 came out on PC, it was released concurrently with all the other consoles. And
Mm-hmm.
we're even in a weird way, we're seeing like the reverse of that. XCOM, Firaxis' games are coming to consoles. Their new Marvel style game is going to be on consoles. Um, uh, Mario v Rabbids or Mario plus Rabbids. Who could have thought, 15 years ago that a tactical strategy game starring Mario and those annoying characters, originally a Rayman spinoff, were going to be on a Nintendo console?
Mm-hmm.
And the point is that the more markets you can hit with your game, the greater the chance you're going to have for success. And one of the ways that a lot of indie developers are going to shoot themselves in the foot almost from the word go is to say, I'm just going to sell the game on my own. Or I'm just going to put it on itch, never look at Steam, never look at Nintendo. You can only buy it one place. And this is something that I spoke with Jeff Vogue about. That we were talking about the rise of digital platforms, and specifically Steam. He's been making games since 1994. He's been selling games by his studio self since 1994. That was before there was any idea of having a digital store. And he told me he never, ever, ever wants to go back to that time. He is more than happy to put his games on a marketplace that he knows hundreds of thousands of people are going to put their eyes on that, as opposed to maybe the tens of hundreds or even fewer than that who are specifically going to Spire Web Software site.
Or itch.
Mm-hmm. One of my favorite under, just diamond in a rough developers, Cryptic Comet. Like, he made some very amazing strategy games, but he could never get them on Steam and he never pursued it further. And his company closed. He's not making video games anymore. And I can tell you that there was certainly a market for each one of his games on Steam. But he was trying to do this back in like 2013, 2014, back when Steam was closed.
Mm-hmm.
Armageddon Empire, Soleum Infernum, what's this other one? forget the name of it. I played it on stream, but like he had some very innovative ideas, but not the market for those games.
Yep. And here's the thing: if you're making a game, I would say there's at least a 70% chance there should be a PC port to that game. The real exception to that would be some mobile games. You know, some mobile games, there's not a market for that on the PC. But pretty much everything else, if you're going to put it on a console, it needs to be on PC too. If if you're going to put it on one, and again, that goes back to it's got to be Steam. You've got to put it on Steam.
Mm-hmm.
You know, does it have to release first on Steam? No. Can you release it first on your website, on itch, on GOG, you know, on, you know, Epic? Yes. But it's got to go to Steam at some point. It's also, can it go on console before it goes on PC? Yes. Can it go on console after PC? Yes. But, you know, more than likely, when you're building a game, you're building a PC version first, because if you don't have a PC version, you can't test the game. Not realistically, except for some mobile games, you would test directly on mobile. But, you know, generally you're building the PC version first, so why not have a PC version? You know, I don't get that with a lot of these console games, other than the fact that they signed a
exclusivity deal. And even then, I mean, Horizon Zero Dawn, a Sony game, is on PC.
Mm-hmm.
And that is monumental. Again, like, this is stuff that would have never happened 10 to 15 years ago, especially, you know, early 2000s, late 90s. We were not seeing console games given, you know, good treatment on PC and vice versa. And another thing that I want to mention about why this is important, again, going back to the market share point of view, is that it grows your consumer base. Sega and Capcom have seen very big numbers by the fact that they're releasing their games on PC now. Yakuza series, Monster Hunter World, is considered the best-selling Capcom game of all time. And I'm sure part of that is the fact that they're now factoring in the PC side of things. When it was originally just on console, then went to the handhelds, then went to the Wii U or the Wii. And this is what you want to see as a developer. You want as many eyes as possible on your game. Because you don't know, you know, as a developer, how many of those are going to convert into consumers. If you release your game onto a platform that only has 500,000 people, well, that's your limit. If you release onto a platform that has 5 million people, well, I'm sure you're going to have a better shot at success.
Yeah. And the bonus question, there's too many hand-holding memes. I can't do that. But I will help you when you release a game on Steam, when you're going to do that. Just can't hold your hand. Too many memes.
But there's not really anything else. Again, like, this is a very, like, cut and dry, or, you know, very straightforward topic. Anything else that you want to mention?
We have 2 points that I think we need to mention. One is that this is in today's market. You know, tomorrow's market is a completely different animal. You know, one day maybe something will be bigger than Steam, and it'll be like you got to go on that platform, not Steam. You know, we don't know. We can't tell the future, kind of thing. But you know, that's based off of today's market. And the other thing is the marketplace is going to vastly change over the next 3 years, because here's why: is just yesterday the news came out that Epic mostly won against Apple and that the court ruled that Apple has to open things up to let people put other, apps that are not on the iPhone App Store on Apple products, meaning that there will be multiple platforms on Apple. That lawsuit is, I believe, solid, but it doesn't actually take place for another 90 days or 89 days or something like that. Mm-hmm. So in 89 days, expect to see some kind of explosion over there, basically. And, things are going to vastly change over there on that market kind of thing. And Epic also has that lawsuit that is still pending with Google on the Android platform over the same thing. And since they've already established precedent over here, it's almost a done deal with the other one, with Android opening up to other platforms, not just the Play Store. Yep. Then that's going to open up the door to consoles, where you can put your own brand of App Store on the Nintendo Switch, the PlayStation, the Xbox.
And Nintendo is going to love that ruling.
Oh, yeah. They're going to love it. But that does not change very much on the PC, but it will potentially change stuff on the PC because PC's already an open platform, unlike those other places, and there's already multiple stores on here. The difference is a lot of this is over the percentage of what they take from the stores. So you can expect that to compete with each other, now that there's going to be competition, they're going to be competing on what percentage the developer gets. So it's not going to be the industry standard of 30%. And you're going to, which is what, Epic's been trying to upset lately, which is going to upset that because when there's other platforms competing on Apple, then they're going to be lowering that percentage. When there's other, things on Android, that's going to lower the percentage. Same thing with the consoles. It's going to lower the percentage that the platforms hold. And therefore, when that comes and changes the industry as a whole, Steam is going to have to lower their percentage, or they're going to get buried and somebody is going to take over, and it's not going to be, you have to put your game on Steam. It's going to be, you have to put your game on whatever platform kind of thing. Yeah. Because Steam has to either follow it or they're going to be buried.
Yeah. When you say 30%, it means whatever gets sold on Steam, Valve takes a 30% cut of it, just right off the top.
Yeah. And keep in mind that that's not the only thing that gets taken off right up the top. You get taxes taken off right up the top and everything else. For example, in my game Chromasia, when it sold, I think our gross revenue was something like 17 or 1800, but the actual payment we got from Steam after the 30% and after the taxes off the top was only like $750.
And this is why when people say, "Oh, developers sold 1 million copies, so they must be millionaires." No, that's not how this works.
No, because you lose roughly half or more of that money. And also keep in mind that you also lose more than that whenever you have a sale.
Yep. Oh, yeah, and bundles and so on. But we're getting off point here. So,
well, we're sort of wrapping up the point, aren't we?
Well, we're kind of now talking about money. But the point about when it comes to kind of the future of these stores is that we never know what is going to be coming down the line. There's still the whole discussions about the loot box law and free-to-play monetization. And if those things go into effect, that's also going to be a huge deal when it comes to mobile and free-to-play games.
But the thing is I don't think those things will ever come true. And here's the thing, is even if it does go through Congress and get approved, the thing is, the second it does, every mobile developer with a lot of money, including Raid Shadow Legends, will be absolutely all over that. And they will be, committing, a juncture, not only appeal on that, but also a lawsuit to the government, and you can expect that to be in court for many, many years. So,
But
like,
we'll see.
you know,
But even like how things change in terms of technologies can impact things. Again, the market is never, solidified in this respect. There's always going to be new things coming, new things that are going to change. And as a developer, it's up to you to keep your eye on what's happening. And if you don't do that, you could either be missing out on potential revenue or releasing your game on the wrong platform for it.
mhm.
It's, again, going back to the example from developers from Japan, that a lot of once Nice and Sega and Bandai Namco were starting to get success, Capcom started to join in. And now these studios are understanding that if this game did really well on the PC, maybe my game will do really well. Conversely, if somebody ports a game from the PC to the console and it blows up like Stardew Valley, like Darkest Dungeon, other developers are going to take note of that.
Mhm.
And the market is just going to constantly change because of it.
Yep. It's a ever growing, ever changing, ever evolving system.
Hmm.
And when, game development is very much in a state of evolution to where we're still in the early days kind of thing. Like
Hmm.
we're evolving at this breakneck pace, Like the way I see things as game development kind of thing, we're like I think we're about to enter into the industrial age kind of thing, and that's when things are really going to change at a breakneck pace.
Hmm.
If you think they've been fast now, I think we're going to have a lot faster very very soon now. So now,
Hmm. Uh, Hope you got the notification, Smell, because I know it went out. But yeah, we are right at our wrap up. So I think that is a good point to end on for this week's show.
smoke
So
back coming is a good point to end on.
for all of our topics. But we're going to wrap things up here. So we have two more kind of points that are related to this section, and then we can finally move on to, I guess, our third series. We'll be covering more of the community management and more of the, I think, soft skills that are not directly related to game dev, but are kind of game development adjacent. And for next week, we're going to be focusing on the path to success, as well as how to prepare for failure, the two extremes. It will be extreme next week on the Save the Extreme cast.
Or maybe it'll be Sapo stream.
But for those of you watching this live or recorded, thank you so much for tuning in. If you're new, be sure to check out all of our information, Discords, Patreon, social media, all that great stuff is all in the description.
Yep. And my channel's down there. Josh's channel is down there on my side. And again, join both of our discords. Smash the lick button and lick the smash button on both of our channels. And yeah, hopefully we have a company name soon on my side.
Mm-hmm. And if you have a suggestion for a topic for a future show, please get in touch.
And I do
And we
want
will.
to do one other thing. People have made a point that nobody realizes that I'm working on a game right now, and that I don't talk about it. It's like, yeah, we actually do talk about it a lot, but
we
let's mention it one time. You know, you could join my Discord kind of thing and come and check out my current game, Neon Continuum, which is a very very different kind of CCG, a grid-based CCG that is sci-fi themed with cyberpunk as a core theme inside of a theme inside of it, and
Mm-hmm.
it's a really really interesting and fun game. And if you join the Discord, once a month or maybe more, you'll be able to come and play the game.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, joining is effort, exactly. It's always effort. But if you want to catch our show where we review indie game store pages and inquiries, we do those Mondays at 4 ET. And if you want to watch these shows live, we do them Sundays at 4 ET as well. So I think that's all we have to say. Anything else you want to end on?
Nope.
All right. So, with everything said, come back for daily discussions on game design here and on game wisdom, where is in the art and science of games. Until next time, take care.
See ya.